So welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, Martin Johnson.
And me, Lydia English.
Hi, Lids.
Hiya.
You all right?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, good. For anyone who's listening and thought that intro was different, we have just rebranded the podcast.
Had a rebrand.
We've just rebranded because the People Performance People is our strapline. Mm-hmm. It's how everybody knows us, T2, the People Performance People. All of the episodes on the pod are around people and performance and the psychology behind that. So we just felt that rather than call it the T2 Hubcast, that a brand change to the People Performance Podcast would take it to the next level. So you're going to hear that a lot at the start of every podcast in the future. And if you go online, you'll see Tom's done a wonderful job on the rebranding as well.
Yeah, it looks great.
So, the People Performance Podcast's first ever episode under the new brand.
God.
And I've got Lydia English in the podcast room, but who, for anyone who is not familiar with Lydia, she is our budding occupational psychologist.
Yes.
Soon to complete her chartership.
Yep, just under a year's time.
Oh, wow. That will be awesome. A lot of years' work gone into that. Lydia runs our entire content and research division, keeps us straight, factual, correct.
I try.
And has been a huge contributor to T2 over the years, and a really, I would say, a confidant to myself. You know, someone where if I need to validate or check anything, you are definitely the person I come to. And
I'm a good sounding board.
You are. So lots of brains in the podcast room this morning, and although it's Lydia's least favourite thing to do, it's public speaking and getting on pods and videos, she's agreed to do it because she feels passionate about today's topic, don't you, Liz? Which
I do,
is
definitely.
Mental health condition myths.
Yes.
So what are the myths around certain mental health conditions? But I think with World Mental Health Day last Thursday, it was probably a timely podcast to do.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think with mental health, we've got so much better the past maybe 10, 15 years of talking about it, reducing that stigma, but sometimes that stigma still remains. And when you say mental health, people automatically think, oh, you've got a mental health condition, but it's not. It's just like physical health.
Yeah. We talk about this all the time, don't we, around... I often wonder whether we've picked the right word for this, as in the word mental.
Well,
So when I say to you, right, when I say the word mental, what do you envisage?
Well, crazy.
Straitjacket, asylum, crazy person, right? And that's what that word has been associated. I mean, they were called mental asylums,
exactly.
Right? So would it have been better, although I don't think people think of branding when you think about these things, but would it have been better to call it psychological health?
Yeah, I think that's a good descriptor.
You know, but we are where we are, and mental health is important. But I think what we're saying here, Lydia, isn't it, is when we talk about mental health, it's like physical health.
Yeah.
Everybody's got it. There are people with good mental health.
Yeah.
There are people with even keel mental health.
Yeah.
They're neither feeling really positive and elated and in a good place, but then they're neither in a bad place either. And then there is poor mental health.
Yeah.
And those who are struggling either from generic day-to-day poor mental health through stresses and multiple other factors, or a clinically diagnosed condition which is causing poor mental health.
Yeah.
And that's two distinct things to really be clear on, isn't it? There is, when you talk about poor mental health, there can be undiagnosed day-to-day low mood, daily stresses, environmental factors, life events, things that have temporarily or in this period of time are putting you in a poor state of mental health. And then there is something that could be clinically diagnosed, which is potentially causing you to have ongoing poor mental health. They're two different things, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And so the word temporarily is the deciding factor, really, because a lot of mental health conditions, you have to have been suffering from those symptoms for a long period of time in order for it to be diagnosed as a mental health condition. And like you say, you've got your everyday mental health. Sometimes you can have a good day, sometimes you can have a bad day. But it's when you're experiencing symptoms for a long period of time where it becomes a mental health condition.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would say for anybody listening, we all in life, no matter how much somebody is looking like they're absolutely knocking it out of the park, we all have temporary periods of poorer mental health.
Yeah.
Whether that's for a weekend, because you've had an absolute nightmare week with a couple of big stressors. One thing's happening, another thing happens. It's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
You might have a virus. You might feel under the weather. You might just have had a poor diet for a few weeks and skip the gym.
Yeah.
Everybody can have periods, moments, days, weekends, weeks of feeling not their best and having poor mental health.
Yeah.
But if 1 week turns into 2 weeks, turns into 3 weeks, and so on, that's where we probably would suggest that you need to do something about it, more so than having a good night's sleep and trying to be positive, right?
Eating a healthy diet,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, it's a passionate one for me, because I think I know from speaking with a lot of customers and coaching a lot of people who have had challenges, there is an awful lot we can do to help ourselves.
Oh yeah.
If you dig deep into 10 questions about someone's life, it's sort of staring you in the face that we can do more. But some people can't, and I think that's where it turns into a condition. So mental health condition myths.
Yes.
I think you want to do this because you read quite a lot and see quite a lot, which irritates you.
Yeah, that is the reason. So, quite often I will hear people, misunderstanding what certain mental health conditions are. And I think that it's that lack of knowledge for some people kind of causes and contributes towards the stigma of mental health, because I think some people perhaps think that they're not as serious as they are. So, for example, we're going to explore bipolar today. And, someone will go, "Ooh, she's had a couple of mood swings lately, or she's got bipolar." And it's just stuff like that. And it's actually, bipolar is a very serious mental health condition.
I see what you mean there, because there's so many instances in the past where as a sort of, it could even be dressed up as banter.
Yeah.
So someone's, like you say, maybe come in the office or you've experienced them having a real high. The next minute, they're moody and mardy as hell. Yeah. And tongue in cheek, someone might say, "Bloody hell, they're bipolar."
Yeah.
And it's creating a stigma, but it's doing a disservice to people who are actually struggling from this,
exactly.
which is a serious mental health condition. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people don't do it with any malice.
No.
It's just one of those things that as a society we get used to saying, and then also the media plays a big role in it, which we'll talk about further as we uncover these myths.
I'm not plugging the book, Lids, I promise, but I talk in I Am Human, Pain and Pleasure, my second book I just wrote around misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah.
And that's also a problem in the modern day world. There is so much online that we can consume about things. There is so many gurus.
Yeah.
There's so many tips around what this is, and how this affects this. And it's information overload.
Oh, yeah.
And it absolutely can send you crazy, going, what is it that I need to do with my life to improve my mood? Because there's so much information to consume, and I don't know what is right and wrong, facts from fiction, and I don't know, more importantly, what's right for me.
Yes. Yeah.
For me, because and that can be a challenge, can't it?
Yeah, because it is different for everybody, and it's the same with physical health. Everyone's physical health is different, so everybody will have, some people may have an intolerance to wheat, so they avoid wheat to keep their mental health physical health tip top. Whereas mental health, for me personally, I need a lot of sleep. Otherwise, I get very, 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 very grumpy and very tearful. So it's just completely different for everybody.
So let me ask you this question before we go into it, because I'd be interested in your answer. I've got my view. I've done my own research and spoken with psychologists and biologists. Where do you sit on the question of mental health being largely governed by genetics passed on by your parents versus environmental, a response to your environment, experiences and triggers, or a mixture of the two? And what I mean by that for the listeners is neurobiologists will argue and make a case for that you have a predisposed scale to happiness based on your your genes passed down by your parents. So, for example, if you had a parent who had depression or poor mental health, the likelihood of you having a genetic makeup which predisposes you to having that condition is high.
Yeah.
Because it's passed on through genetic code into neuroticism, levels of neuroticism.
Yeah.
Versus psychologists might say, well, actually, we are impacted all the time by our environment, life events, trauma, interpretations of stresses and triggers, etc. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I suppose it depends on the mental health condition, because it's still something that scientists, psychologists, biologists, etc. are learning about. And depending on the condition, it depends what plays a role. So, for example, depression can be caused by environmental factors. There is that family influence in there, so there is a genetic factor in there. It could be caused by alcohol. It could be caused by the loss of a loved one. It can be caused by the menopause. So it's a complete mixture. OCD, for example, so they've found that is influenced by a chemical imbalance in the brain, but also it's learnt behaviours as well. So it's very much, it depends on the condition, and it's really hard to kind of pinpoint this is what causes that mental health condition. And I suppose that's how mental health seems a bit more of a complicated topic to discuss, because it's not necessarily as straight. You can't pinpoint a reason like you can do with physical health. For example, like you say, a heart attack, someone has a heart attack, that could be due to lifestyle, it could be due to genetics,
cholesterol. You could do a blood test, and the blood test will pinpoint exactly probably what's going on and causing that. Whereas you can't do that. I like that. So what you said is it's not an exact science.
No.
You've got multiple things at play here. The biologists are probably right in terms of genetic predisposition.
Yeah.
The psychologists are probably right in terms of stresses, environmental factors, and then you put into the fact of each person is viewing the world in a completely different way. So the way they interpret situations could be vastly different as well. Yeah. So you put all that into the mix, and there's not an exact answer. It's probably a little bit of all unique to that unique individual.
That particular person, yeah.
Okay. So mental health condition myths. Let's go into the first one. Not one that would often be discussed on a podcast.
No.
For the person sat in their car on their commute to work right now, or running with us in their ears, or whatever it might be, and thinking, I just want to learn something about myself.
Yeah.
But a fascinating topic all the same in terms of the term schizophrenia.
Yes.
So the first myth that you've put down is a myth that is generally thought that people with schizophrenia have a split personality. And that really is how it's viewed. It's like, if you're a schizophrenic, you go from being one person to another person, like instantly, and they are polar opposite people.
Yeah. And that's not the case.
Okay.
So the reason which people say, or scientists, psychologists say, why people might have that misinterpretation of schizophrenia is because it actually comes from two Greek words meaning split and mind.
Right. Didn't know that.
So it's meant to describe a split from reality. So really it's got nothing to do with personalities and acting like one personality one day, one personality the next day. So that's caused something called dissociative identity disorder, where you do have different personalities, but schizophrenia is not that. So it's that split from reality where you're you don't know what's real and what's not.
Yeah. Which would explain, therefore, why if you are going through an episode of schizophrenia, you have an inability to see reality, and you are more likely to take actions and do things which are harmful or damaging, because you no longer know what is right or wrong, real or imagined.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm guessing things like hallucination and all of those, the paranoia, all of that will start to kick in when you're having an episode.
That's the thing, yeah. So with schizophrenia, generally, it develops very slowly, but it actually starts in the teenage years. So obviously, when you're a teenager, you're going through all these hormonal changes anyway, and you're a bit confused, and you're like feeling one way one minute, one way the next. So actually, it can be quite hard to diagnose initially, because some people might just put it down to hormones and, oh, they're just being a teenager. However, when it does develop, so it's actually divided into two different types of symptoms, which the terminology here personally confuses me a little bit, but we'll go with it. So there's positive symptoms and negative symptoms. Now, what we mean here by positive and negative is the presence of symptoms, and negative is basically no symptoms or the inability to do anything. So I'll go into more detail. So positive symptoms of schizophrenia, that is your hallucinations and your delusions. So hallucinations are where someone sees, hears, smells, or feels things that do not exist, and they're like, so that it's in their mind.
Yeah.
And then delusions is a belief held with complete conviction, even though it's based on a mistaken, strange, or unrealistic view.
Right.
So you've said they're your positive symptoms. And then you've got your negative symptoms. So people with schizophrenia will, they basically don't want to look after themselves. So it's a lack of wanting to do anything. Self-care, hygiene, they don't sleep, they don't eat. So it's a split between those two symptoms. I mean, from reading up on it, it sounds awful, schizophrenia. And I think that's what makes me feel really strongly about it, because people think, oh, they've just got different personalities, and they're not. It's nothing to do with that. It's, they're hearing voices, they're, don't know what's real, what's not. Is that the voice telling me to do that, or is it me? So it's, it just sounds dreadful.
One of the more severe mental health disorders that we come across, and it's why a lot of people who end up committing heinous crimes are often diagnosed with schizophrenia, because can you imagine when that boils to a point, left unchecked and unsupported, where you live in a world of complete imagination and paranoia, with a constant voice, so it's a very troubling, challenging mental health condition, and needs to probably be treated with the respect it deserves.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, obviously we do. It's coined the terms when, when someone's having an outburst, people call them a schizo.
Yes, exactly.
And things like that.
Yeah.
And, it does what it says on the tin. It defines a person who is absolutely having a manic episode.
Yeah.
So, but it must be, like you said, it must be a horrible one. But so what we're saying there is it's not a split personality.
No.
It's a split from reality, which is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I didn't realise schizophrenia was two words for...
split and mind.
Split mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Greek.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. 2, the second myth we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
You mentioned it already, bipolar, but the myth is people with bipolar disorder are just moody.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said earlier, people think if you're just having a mood swing, then that's bipolar. So basically, bipolar is bi, so you're two, and you're polar, so two opposite ends of the spectrum. So people with bipolar, I mean, not all the time, this is only when they're having episodes, they'll have periods of being really, really high, it's a really great mood, or really, really low, so really, really depressed.
And that, from my understanding of bipolar and the work we've done in the past on understanding it, is the key to watch out for is the rapid pace of that change. So
yes.
very, very rarely does someone go from totally euphoric and triumphant to depressed and low in, say, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But in bipolar, that switch can happen.
It can,
very
although
quickly.
It's quite rare for people with bipolar to switch that quickly.
Right.
So they'll have periods that will last a couple of weeks of really high, and then they might just go back to their normal selves.
And then it could then crash later.
Go the other way. Yeah.
But yeah.
It is possible for them to switch very quickly, but it is quite rare in people with bipolar.
So the main thing there then is the extremity of the low to the high.
Yes.
So if we always talk, don't we, Lids, about when we sort of speak with people about this around a scale of 1 to 10. If you imagine a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 is euphoric and completely elated, and 1 is clinically depressed. You go up the scale. 2 is depressed. 3 is low mood. 4 is,
bit sad.
5 is even keel. 6 is optimistic. 7 is feeling good. 8 is having a great day. All the way up to 10, right? So usually, if your mental health, and this is the way to think about it, if your mental health would be classified as relatively stable, you would probably fluctuate, because the stresses and strains in life means we all go up and down that scale to some extent. But you would usually go no lower than a 3, 4 or 3, and probably plateau out at a 7 or an 8. Nobody's manically happy, and if they are, that's also worth mentioning. That's probably a sign as well. So if you think about a stable scale, you're probably going from a 3 to a 7. And depending on your situation, your physical health, your environment, your relationships, everything, you're going to fluctuate. Whereas what we're saying with bipolar is you can literally go from being a 9 or a 10 to being a 1 or a 2. And it's the extremity that is sort of what enables it to be diagnosed.
Exactly. So symptoms, so if someone's going through a period of depression, so those symptoms will include, feeling sad, hopeless, irritable, lacking in energy, difficulty concentrating and remembering things, self-doubt, lack of appetite, difficulty sleeping. Whereas when they have a high, which is what they call a mania episode, or a manic phase of bipolar, so that is feeling happy, elated or overjoyed, talking quickly, full of energy, coming up with really great ideas, not feeling like sleeping because they're so happy they don't want to sleep. And this can be quite dangerous actually when someone is having a manic episode, because it can lead them to make decisions which can be damaging. So people might go on a spending spree, they might start gambling, they might go, oh, you know what, I'm gonna go to Africa and start herding cows, so it just really really random things. That's probably a bit of a silly example, but
the spontaneous decision making of things that are not thought through, that then when you inevitably drop are going to catch you out. No, that makes sense. So it's not just the mood swings. It's, I don't know how much you know, Liz. I wonder what's happening in the brain that causes the person to have the extreme highs or lows. Whether it's chemical, the way the synapses work and the chemical switches or whatever it might be. But I'm sure neuroscientists are doing quite a lot to try and understand what causes that. And of course, the medication for bipolar then is designed to almost make them be even keel, not too high or not too low. It's like try to keep them even keel.
Keep everything stable, under control, and trying to stop those episodes from happening as regularly.
And what's worth mentioning here, if you're listening to this, is we can all, and this is why I talked about the scale, we can all sit there and go, well, that describes me to an extent. I have times where I'm really happy and joyous and everything's going right. And I also have times where I'm irritable, down, everyone's pissing me off, and I'm tired and I just want to go to bed. Don't sit there thinking, oh my God, I need to go and get a diagnosis for bipolar. Unless you sat there and you resonate with the extremes of a level 1 or 2 or 9 or 10 and some of the symptoms of mania that you described and some of the symptoms of the low that you described. Quite often, again, a little bit like with schizophrenia, bipolar at its low will probably result in self-neglect of your own needs, and, how you look, your routines, your personal hygiene, know, absolutely. All right. Let's go into the third one, mental health condition myths. So this one is, it's interesting because I'm reading it and I'm thinking, I've got a question on this already. depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Now, as we always do at T2, we simplify all the language to make it digestible for people. Whenever we're talking about brain chemicals, they're not strictly chemicals. They are neurotransmitters that send signals to the rest of the mind and body. However, think of it that these are chemicals that flood the brain, which induce a certain emotion, feeling, or reaction.
Yes.
And when we talk about chemicals, we always talk about cortisol, the fight or flight chemical, adrenaline. We talk about dopamine. We've talked about serotonin, oxytocin, the ones that make us feel in a certain way, either good or bad about a situation.
Yeah.
So depression is, you're saying it's a myth that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yes. So it's not the only cause.
All right, well, you've answered my question already then.
So this myth has come about because often when people are diagnosed with moderate to severe depression, one of the ways of treating it, so the recommended treatments, is to put the person on antidepressants. Now, in recent years, the most common type of antidepressant is something that we call selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So they basically stop the serotonin from being uptaked, if that's a word, in the brain. So it keeps this chemical, the serotonin, which is associated with feeling of belonging, feeling of love, feeling like you're part of something. So it keeps that chemical in one place, and that in turn lifts the mood. Now, SSRIs, the shortened version of it, can be used to treat depression. However, they don't work in all cases. So scientists say roughly they work in 60% of cases. So if they only work in 60% of people, there's other causes,
other factors at play
of depression. So like I mentioned earlier, depression can be caused by stressful events, so loss of a loved one, divorce, family illness. The family history can play a part. So they have found that if you have a parent who suffers from depression, you are more likely to then also suffer from depression. In women, it can be caused by the menopause.
Yep.
So obviously you've got your hormones there playing havoc with everything. That can cause low mood and depression. Loneliness is a really big one. That can cause depression. And then obviously you've got your alcohol and drugs as well. So alcohol is a depressant. So I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but I know for me, if I go out and have a few glasses of wine, the next day I can feel really, really low and really, really down. And it's because the alcohol is a depressant there. And when it comes to drugs, that can be medications as well. So it's not just your other drugs that you think of when you say drugs. It can be medications which cause depression.
Yeah. So what you're saying there is the myth of depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. You're not saying that it can't be, because as we know, it absolutely can be as a result of low serotonin or dopamine or depletion in a certain neurotransmitter.
Yeah.
Or that your cortisol tap is just left on and it's been left on too long and you've got yourself in a continuous threat state type thing. But there's many other factors, and like you say, 40% of people SSRIs don't work on, then there are other things at play.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I listen to Gary Brecker at the minute on podcasts, and he talks a lot about deficiencies.
Yes.
So it might not be anything to do with the brain. It could be nothing to do with dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, cortisol. It could be that your B vitamins are chronically low and have been for a number of years.
Yeah.
And therefore you are deficient in a vitamin that is fundamental for the way your mind and body works.
Yeah, exactly.
Vitamin D is another one that is a big contributing factor. Iron, if you are low in iron over a period of time, it can inhibit your ability to take nutrients out your foods and get the right amount of dietary requirements in, and that then has an effect on mental state. So he talks a lot about, we check all the time. Like if you go with what would be low mood or depression, we treat the symptom, which is I'll give you some SSRIs to try and keep more serotonin in your brain. But we don't look at what might be the cause, which could be as simple as lack of B12.
It could be, yeah.
It could be as simple as that. Or you're drinking too much. Or you're not sleeping enough. Or you're lonely. Right? So I like Gary Brecker's work and some of the other people who are looking into this at the minute, because it's like, let's look at if we know that only 60% of people respond to SSRIs.
Yeah.
It's like a bingo. We're trying to go, let's give you them and see if it works on you. And then I'm not against that, because that's the thing. But if we did more testing and understood maybe what the root cause would be.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there. Can you imagine if it was just something as simple as a lack of B vitamins?
Yeah, exactly.
Because your body, your genetics are predisposed. Your DNA suggests that you're not going to produce B vitamins or be able to, absorb them from your foods as much as somebody else is.
Yeah, yeah. And that just shows that close link between your mental and your physical health. One does affect the other. Yeah. So if you are low in vitamin B12, that can affect your mood. And your mood can also affect physical symptoms as well. I mean, if you think a very, very simple example is hunger. So obviously there's the word hangry, but actually that is a real thing. So when you're hungry, you're more irritable than when you're not hungry. And it kind of simplifies that link between your physical and mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a huge thing.
It is. And the problem with it is there are probably hundreds of potential contributing factors, and trying to pinpoint, like going back to what we said earlier, trying to pinpoint the one for you that's causing you the problem could take time. Yeah. But this is why I always say to people, you've got to push and help yourself. Let's start with your bloods. Yeah. Let's start with your basic vitamins and your levels and your iron and your vitamin D and B and all of this, your intrinsic factor and, all the rest of it. Let's start with the basics. Right. Once we've then qualified that out, let's look at, is there something in my gut health? Am I intolerant to something? Am I, reacting to something? Now let's look at my physical health. Now let's look, right. There's plenty of things you can go down to try and get to an answer by eliminating certain things one at a time. Yeah, because
definitely.
Otherwise people just feel helpless. It's like, I don't know where to start and what to do. Yeah.
So just going back to the myth as well. So neurologists have looked into the brain and depression, and there's certain structures within the brain which I say different to somebody with depression to somebody with not depression. So for example, I thought this was absolutely fascinating. So they'd done some research where they'd scanned people's brains with people with depression, and they found that the hippocampus was smaller than with people who had depression than those who don't have depression. And every depressive episode they experienced, it continued to shrink. And also, I watched this video of a professor. She's a professor at the University of Cambridge. She's called Dr. Camilla Nord. And she was saying that actually when you're taking SSRIs, it can alter your cognition. So what she was saying was that, so for anybody that's ever taken an antidepressant, you will know that it doesn't lift your mood straight away. However, the antidepressants start increasing that amount of serotonin in the brain straight away. So what she is saying is, so there must be another reason. So what she says is that they actually help to alter that cognition, so the way you perceive things. So let's say you're walking down the corridor at work, and a colleague passes you and they ignore you. Now, one person who might be having a bad day that day go, oh my God, I've done something wrong, I've upset them. Another person who has a slightly different cognition of the situation might go, oh, they're probably just really busy.
Yeah.
So what the SSRIs do is they alter that cognition. So basically, when you start taking them, this happens straight away. What Camilla Nord is saying is that if you leave it long enough of that cognition being altered, then actually that can lift your mood, because you don't necessarily take things as personally. If someone what you might perceive as gives you a mucky look, that might just be their face.
Yeah.
And you give them the benefit of the doubt. So you interpret things differently. So facial expressions, situations, scenarios. So if you do that for long enough, it automatically lifts your mood, because it's kind of like you almost lose the, you just don't care as much, if that makes sense.
But, and coming back to it, therefore, that's okay if taking SSRIs is enabling you to just alter your perception of things.
Yeah.
But probably explains why, if you then all of a sudden just come off them and you haven't fixed the root cause, then
It
the
comes
likely of it reoccurring is high.
Yeah.
So people get in this cycle of going, well, I'll just stay on the... And there's no stigma with SSRIs. They clearly work and help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I often say they're very good for intervention for a 6-month, 12-month period, just to get to someone to buy themselves the time to find out what's going on.
Exactly, yeah.
But it could be your thyroid. It could be, like we said, vitamin deficiency.
Yeah.
It could be your blood sugars and glucose levels. It could be a multitude of things that are fixable at the source, which could then allow you to get back on track on a more regular basis. So, I would implore anybody to just keep asking the questions and finding out and having a full check over of everything, because it could be something.
Yeah, and also with depression, SSRIs, of course, are the only treatment for it. Talking therapies, so CBT, going to a counsellor, that can work as well. And for some people, that works instead of the SSRIs. Some people have a combination of both. Research actually shows that talking therapy targets a different area of the brain that SSRIs do.
Right.
So again, that's showing that there's different causes completely. So somebody might really, really benefit from talking to somebody and just trying to work out in their brain actually what's going on. I myself I went through a period of counselling, and my goodness, did it do me the world of good. I was feeling really low, didn't know what was going on, and I went and talked to somebody, and it just made everything make sense in my head.
And that's a wonderful thing to sort of message to send out there, because I think people generally are skeptical of talking therapies. It's like, how is me sitting in a room with a counsellor or with somebody going to help the way my brain works and how I feel?
Yeah.
But it's proven. It targets a different part of the brain. And if you can then start processing your thoughts more productively going forward, that is a wonderful thing. So love that. Okay, last one. Mental health condition myths. Number 4, you mentioned OCD earlier, which is obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
Again, is often bandied around in many jokes. I am guilty myself of I do it about my own self. I say, well, just to satisfy my OCD, can we just tidy up the office?
Yes.
Now, I don't have OCD that I'm aware of, right? But I'm saying it in the context of acknowledging that I know I can be slightly obsessive and compulsive about cleanliness and tidiness.
Yeah.
Right? So is it to the extreme of true OCD? Absolutely not. But it's sort of my way of saying, look, guys, I've got these quirks.
Yeah.
Please help me out, right? But the myth is people with OCD just like things to be neat and organised. Now, I probably justified that myth by my opening dialogue there, talking about how I like to be neat and tidy.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? Obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yes. So actually, I've seen things before where people actually think the O and the C in OCD means organised and clean.
Right. Organised, clean disorder.
Yeah. And that's not the case. So it's OCD. So like we said, obsessive compulsive disorder, because that's how those are the symptoms of OCD. So it's characterised by your obsessions and compulsions. So obsessions can be, the fear of harming yourself or others by mistake. So, for example, fear that you may set the house on fire if you leave something on. Could be the fear of contamination by disease. So that leads to compulsions of washing your hands constantly. So you've got your obsession, and then the compulsions almost back the obsession up. So you have the obsession in your head, and then your compulsions are the behaviours which help you almost not fix, but
answer the obsession.
Exactly.
So for example, if you're laid in bed at night and you go, have I locked the door?
Yeah.
and you know you've locked the door, but you're obsessing about locking the door. So your compulsion would be to get out of bed, go downstairs and check the door handle.
Yes.
Then you go back to bed, and then 15 minutes later, you go, did I check that door handle properly?
Yeah.
Did I push down hard enough?
Yeah.
That's the obsession. The compulsion is then to get out of bed, go downstairs and check the door again.
Yeah, do it again.
And that's where certain patterns can emerge. And this could be multifaceted. This is not restricted to have I left the gas on, have I locked the door, do I need to wash my hands? You could obsess, you could have OCD around the most weird and wonderful things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think, so with you saying there about leaving the gas on, so, and obviously then going to check, but it almost works in a cycle. So then your compulsions then feed your obsession. So you then start repeating those behaviours. So you're like, right, if I don't check the stove 5 times this morning, then the house will set on fire. So it kind of starts working backwards as well.
What about, so there'll be plenty of people listening to this where it's not as severe as that, but they do obsess about things. So I'll give you an example. You're traveling on holiday. You booked your flights. You have set your alarm. You know what your time you need to be up in the morning. Get on the road, park the car, get to the airport, get on your flight. What about people who don't just go to bed and go to sleep and wake up on their alarm, but they obsess about what if I miss my alarm? What if I sleep in? What if there's an accident on the road? What if I don't make the airport in time? What if I don't get on the plane? Have I booked the right car parking? Shall I just check that I've booked the right car parking again? What if I've got the dates wrong on the car park? Right, that could construe normal worries. But is that a sign of OCD if you take it to the point where you can't even sleep that evening at the fear of one of those things being wrong?
So I would argue that's maybe moving more towards anxiety rather than OCD, because you haven't got that compulsion to back up those behaviours.
There's nothing you can do in that moment. Well, you could check your paperwork a million times, maybe. That could be a compulsion. But you can't predict whether there's going to be an accident on the motorway.
No, that's the thing,
You know, absolutely. So that would be maybe more generalised or high anxiety. At the fear of your alarm not going off, your phone running out of battery, accident on the road, missing your flight. But you wouldn't say it would be, and plus that's around a one-off event. At that time, not a daily and weekly thing.
Exactly. So people with OCD, it takes over their lives. So they, you know, perhaps if they do have it and they've got a fear about the house being set on fire, they would have to get up, say, an hour earlier, so then they can make sure they leave the house on time. So they need to start making changes to their lives in order to make time for them to act upon their compulsions and kind of relieve their obsessive thoughts.
Wow. So and that's often something people struggle to differentiate. Again, I mean, I know people who I have this conversation with all the time. You know, things like bipolar and OCD are co-occurring disorders, psychological disorders that need diagnosis and management. But there are people with high neuroticism and high levels of anxiety who could obsess about things. But it wouldn't quite constitute OCD. It might just be that you're a highly neurotic, anxious person and you fear things going wrong. Well, she wouldn't mind me saying, my Lucy is always worried about things. She'll be worried about the kids. You know, what if... So, for example, Xander will go off to school. She's got her day planned. Everything's, you know, absolutely fine. And she'll have an intrusive thought that says, what if Xander chokes at lunch and I'm not there? Which then creates anxiety. And the worry will then self-perpetuate. Or she'll worry about future events. That she can't control. It starts off as hypothetical worries. What if? And then before you know it, within an hour, you've gone to the extreme of, well, what if I got cancer and I wasn't here for the kids? You would say that that's more anxiety an anxiety condition than it is a compulsive or obsessive condition.
So if you was to say, you know, if she's worried about Xander choking on his lunch, for example, OCD, I suppose an example would that be, right? So if I don't chop this sandwich into 8 completely equal parts, Xander will die.
Right.
That's
so the
your
compulsion of the action of controlling everything comes on the back of it.
And then she might go back and check several times that the sandwich is in 8 completely equal parts.
Yeah. And then ring the school at 1 p.m. to make sure that he hasn't choked.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. Yeah. Absolutely. And there'll be so many people, right? And this is why it's so useful. There'll be so many people listening to this going, oh my God, I think like that sometimes.
Yeah.
I have these intrusive thoughts sometimes.
Yeah.
And like I always explain around, particularly for women, the more I've learned about psychology and the more I've learned about the body and the mind and how it changes through different factors, the more you just sort of think, wow, men do have it in general more. We are more lucky, because there's 2 key points in a woman's life that significantly change what we're talking about. Giving birth.
Yep.
You know, giving birth to children means that you carry the burden of survival on behalf of the little ones as that natural maternal instinct.
Yep.
That's hardwired through evolution, that you will spot danger and hypothetically worry about what could come or what could harm both yourself and the children.
Yeah.
And so the susceptibility to anxiety after giving birth significantly increases.
Yes.
And then after all of that and all the hardship of bringing the kids up to adulthood when they haven't choked on their sandwich and they have made it through, you then go through the menopause.
Yes. Not looking forward to that.
And so both of those life events generally are significantly change the biochemistry in females.
Yeah.
And so if you're listening to this and you've gone, I was never like this, I was carefree, I was absolutely thinking, and then I had children and now I'm approaching my 40s, 50s, and I'm worried about everything and I'm anxious about stuff and I can't switch my brain off.
Yeah.
It's probably the reasons why.
Yeah.
And the good news though, Lids, is if you're determined enough, you can do something about it.
Yeah, you definitely can.
I've spoke to 2 people recently who I'm coaching who have recently gone on HRT.
Yeah.
You know, the patches for menopause. It's changed their life.
Yeah.
It's changed their life. Just to finally go and accept that there was a hormone deficiency as a result of the menopause.
Yeah.
You put that back into the body and the body starts working as it should.
Yeah.
And so I would implore anybody out there who's listening to this, who's resonated with anything, to, you know, to help yourself.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how long it takes and how many appointments and how many questions.
Yeah.
Start to find out your unique you and what's going on for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And like, just as we wrap this up as well, I'd just like to say that obviously neither of us here are psychologists or mental health experts. But there is help out there, hopefully, by listening to this. Even if you don't suffer with a mental health condition, it's just increased that knowledge and understanding. There, hopefully reduce the stigma slightly just by listening to this. But there's always help out there. Go to your GP. Mind.org.uk is a great website as well, which has got all sorts of resources and information on there and helplines.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lydia, I've loved that, and I could probably speak to you all day. And I think we need to get more Lydia on the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She doesn't sound too sure. No, honestly, that was fantastic, and I think just some mental health myths there, in line with World Mental Health Day that was last Thursday. Yeah. We've talked about some very rare conditions, not rare, but we've talked about conditions not everybody experiences there, with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, OCD. We've talked a little bit about depression and what's going on there. And then we've just finished off there talking a little bit around, actually, though, there is a hell of a lot of people, which is very normal, that suffer from increased anxiety.
Yes.
Often we treat the symptom, but for me, the message here was 9 times out of 10, there'll be an underlying cause. Yeah. And it's up to us to drive. Yeah. And ask the questions and have as many appointments as you can to start uncovering a picture of you. There's so many things in modern day now, Liz, where you can do these tests where it gives you a full DNA test.
Oh, yeah.
It'll give you full food intolerance results. There's lots of stuff out there technology-wise now where we can start to build a picture of what's going on for us.
Yeah.
So get out there and do it if you can.
Yeah. Help yourself.
Yeah, and others will then help you for sure.
Exactly.
Lydia, fascinating. Love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to get this right because it's my first finish. We'll be back with another People Performance podcast.